Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. So it's time to tackle another frequently asked question about homeschooling, and that is, what if my child doesn't like homeschooling? You know, this question is asked for various reasons. Sometimes people ask it just in theory because they're just wondering what they should do or what I would do if one of my kids didn't like being homeschooled. But some people actually ask it because their kids are telling them this, telling them that they do not like being homeschooled. So before I get into my answer to this question, I did want to let you know that a while back I did make a video called Help My Child Hates Being Homeschooled, in which I did share some tips that might help your child to better enjoy learning at home. But I'm actually not going to talk too much about that today because we need to cut to the chase. First, I'm going to talk to you parents. When your child tells you that they don't like to be homeschooled, so often parents, they really lack confidence. They start to doubt the decision that they made. And very often, one of the first inclinations is to just give the child the option of going back to school. But I want you to think about why you do this. What if the tables were turned? Think of all of the school students, traditional school, who tell their parents constantly that they hate school. And you know, this is common. Kids say that all the time. I hate school. I hate school. If every parent whose child goes to traditional school would say, oh, you know what? You hate school. Let's just take you out and homeschool you right away. If every parent did that, there would be droves of parents pulling their kids out of school to start homeschooling them simply because their kids don't like school. You know, this really goes to show, it's proof to me that a lot of parents, even though they have made the decision to homeschool, they still do not consider it to be on equal footing with traditional schools, with public schools, with the school setting that they themselves grew up with. A lot of parents might say, yes, that they understand how good homeschooling is and how good it is for children. But I think that subconsciously, a lot of parents still really doubt that it is an equivalent of school, or in fact, could even be better than the school setting. And you know, so if this is the case with you, I really think that you should just start to think about why you decided to homeschool your kids. What were the reasons that went into this? What has really helped you to be grounded in making this decision for your kids? And one of the very first things that you need to understand in order to be confident about that choice is to realize that, yes, homeschooling is an equally valid form of education. In fact, homeschooling has been around far longer than the traditional school setting has. So I want you to just keep that in mind. Just because your kids say that they don't like homeschooling doesn't mean that you should automatically put them back in school. A lot of kids are just really disagreeable. You know, have you ever heard of the grass is greener on the other side? There are some kids who really look at everything that way. And I would say there's a good portion of kids and adults who have the grass is always greener on the other side syndrome going on in their head all the time. And you know, it's true. Kids who are in school will very often think, oh, well, homeschooled kids have it better. And kids who are homeschooled will often think, oh, well, kids who are in school have it better. But what ends up happening is that a lot of times, I know with my kids in particular, once I did make that decision years ago to stop homeschooling after the first 2 years and put my kids back in school, yeah, I'm talking from experience on this subject. I have done it. I started out homeschooling for 2 years. I burned out. My kids did not like homeschooling at all because of my approach to it, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And what ended up happening was that I completely regretted the decision 2 years later, and my kids did not like school. They realized that the grass is not always greener on the other side. So what you really need to understand is that parents make lots of decisions for their children when it is going to affect a large portion of their lives. When it's a really important decision, it is the parent's responsibility to make these decisions for their kids. You know, parents will not say to their 5-year-old, if you would like to go out and play in the street, that's your prerogative. No, parents will draw the line and they will say, this is what's best for you, so this is what you're going to do. You know, the same thing goes maybe with if your kids want to play in a neighborhood that's not so good. You might have a parent who says, no, I'm sorry, I know that you want to play there, but I know that this is not good for you, so I'm gonna make sure that you stay closer to home. And you know, that is one of the really important things about being a parent, is being responsible for your kids, because you have more wisdom, you have more knowledge than they do, you have more life experience than they do. So very often kids will look at things from that whole grass is greener perspective because they don't really know what the other side of the fence actually looks like. So that's one thing I want you to think about. If it's just, you know, a lack of confidence, and just really to understand that homeschooling is just as valid as traditional schooling. In my opinion, it's a better form, it's a better format for education, but you know, even if you want to just say that it's an equally valid form of education, you have got to understand that and realize that you can't just kind of sway every time that your kids complain about school. And that's where I'm going to move into the next segment. And I do want to say that if you are a parent who started homeschooling right away and already had that option on the table, if this doesn't work out, you can always send your kids, you kids can always go back to school. If you're a parent who believes that, if you are a parent who honestly believes that school is okay too, and that there's nothing wrong with public school, you just wanted to try homeschooling, and if you wanted to send your kids back to school, like from the very beginning, if that was always an option, you know, that is, I'm not telling you what to do, but what I am talking to is those parents who are really feeling conflicted because their kids are complaining about wanting to go back to school and they really don't want to do it, but they're kind of feeling forced to send their kids back. And what I am telling you is that this is where, you know, just being a decisive parent comes in, a decisive and educated parent, not educated in academic things, but educated on what school is really all about, on the history of it, on the agendas behind it, and that may surely help you to stick to your decision better. That is what has helped me since I took my kids back out of school. I read about the history of education. I know what it's all about now, and you can bet that I would never voluntarily send my kids back to school, ever. So let's talk about the kids now. So some reasons that kids might not like homeschooling, besides the grass is always greener on the other side syndrome, is, you know, have you as the parent actually thought about the techniques that you are using with your kids in your homeschool? And I really do go into this in more detail in my Help My Child Hates Being Homeschooled video, but I will link that in the description box. But if you don't really feel like checking out that video right now, I'll just give you some ideas. You know, as the parent, are you letting your child have a say in what they're learning about? Are you taking into account their learning style, or are you being really strict about following that traditional school model of, you know, textbooks and reports and report cards and tests? You know, a lot of kids don't fit that model, and that's why homeschooling is such a good choice for so many kids. So if you're finding that your kids are really fighting you on that, it could very well be that you just aren't taking their learning styles into account. You know, how do your kids like to learn? Do they like to do things with their hands? Do they like to read all the time? Do they like to watch documentaries? Take cues from your kids and work those into your homeschool routine. Your homeschool does not have to look like school, which brings me into the next tip. How long are your homeschool lessons? Or even how long is your homeschool day? You know, just because school lasts 6, 7, 8 hours a day does not mean that your homeschool day has to. Honestly, depending on the age of your child, you know, a kindergartner could hit everything that they need to, because kindergartners really don't need much more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. Kindergartners, for example, could be done in like 20 minutes. And even if you get up into like the middle school years, high school years, very often they are done in a few hours because there is just not as much busy work as a regular school day entails, and everything that goes into the regular school day with the changing of the classes and disciplinary issues and I forget, assemblies. I forgot what they were called for a minute. But you know, your day does not have to be as long as a school day. That's first of all. Second of all, your homeschool lessons do not have to be as long as, say, a period in a traditional school. Your homeschool lessons do not have to be 45 to 50 minutes just because that's what they do in school. Keep your lessons short. And you know, that is actually something that Charlotte Mason said. If you haven't read up on Charlotte Mason, I really encourage you to read, I think it's called For the Children's Sake. That is a really good book. And she really knows the Charlotte Mason method. But one thing about the Charlotte Mason method that I completely agree with is that a lot of kids, most kids do better with shorter lessons. Now, for a really young child, this might be a 5 to 10 minute lesson. And if you're getting up into high school, it could be maybe a 20-minute lesson, sometimes even a 30-minute lesson. But you know, with my high schoolers who had ADHD, I've already even kept, it was only one high schooler I've had so far that had ADHD. But yeah, I kept his lessons usually to about 15 minutes. And here's the thing. We tend to think of everything more as a quantity issue, right? But this really is one of those times when quality trumps quantity every single time. I'm thinking that my video is going to be flagged because I said trumps. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that's not what I meant. Anyway, you don't need to have a lesson last really long in order for your kids to understand what you're doing. In fact, what ends up happening is after the first, say, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at the most, a lot of kids, you'll start to lose their attention. They're not going to be paying any attention anymore. So they might have absorbed those first several minutes of your lesson or the first several minutes of their exercises. But once you get beyond a certain point, their eyes start glazing over. They start rushing around, and you can bet that they are not absorbing anything. So really, if you cut those lessons short, your kids are not missing out. Another idea that I have is, you know, again, this moves back into the traditional school at home model, but you know, it really could just work with any homeschool model at all. Is any homeschool model, with exception to maybe like unschooling or relaxed homeschooling, but a lot of school models, even if they seem like they're very gentle learning styles, a lot of parents, especially if they're type A, like I tend to be, and I have really had to fight against that in order to be a relaxed homeschooler, but you know, you can be too rigid. Even if you have what seems to be the most gentle approach to learning, some parents really just are inclined to try to stick to those routines, stick to those schedules, and just do everything by the book, make sure that every single lesson is covered. And if the lesson isn't covered, then the school day takes twice as long, or you definitely have to do extra work the next day. And don't be too rigid in that, you know? Learning happens all the time. Even if you don't finish every single last lesson in your curriculum for the year, even if you don't finish every single last lesson that you have planned out for your homeschool day, your kids are learning, because life learning, the things that are happening in everyday life, those are the things that are going to stick with your kids. You know, even if you think back to your own school years, how much of that has ever really impacted your life? I would have to say that maybe 30% of what I learned in school has impacted my life. And most of that had to do with knowing how to read, write, and do math. And other than that, not much else has really helped me with anything other than maybe homeschooling my own kids. So, you know, just don't ever underestimate life learning. That is very often far more of an impact on your kids than any curriculum, no matter how good it is, your kids can have. But anyway, that's all that I have for you today. I hope this has maybe encouraged you a little bit. If your kids are giving you an issue about wanting to go back to school, you know, you've got to know your whys. You've got to know why you're doing this. And again, it's so important. You have got to realize that kids who are in school say they don't like school all the time. And you know what? It's up to you as a parent to do what's best for your child. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. I think I already said that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram because YouTube keeps disabling my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, you can check out that link in the description box. I will leave that there as well. And I hope you have a great day.